This conference will now be recorded.
My mouse is sticking a little bit here. Well, welcome everyone. I certainly, first of all, I want to thank Murray for putting this together and for all of your folks for their willingness to attend. I recognize how important your time is, and I want to make sure I use it wisely. So one of the things I like to point out right from the beginning is, if there are questions, you can ask them at any time. You can type them in, or you can just interrupt me and say, Jack, I've got a question. We'll go ahead. I'll answer the question if I can. If I don't have an answer, I will get that answer for you from our engineering group. So in fact, I have a meeting with our engineering group tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. my time, which is 3:30 p.m. their time, and or 9:30 a.m. my time. And so any questions that come up, I'm sure that if I can answer, I will get those for you tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and get our presentation going here. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So, and Murray, you did say you wanted to concentrate primarily on the technical side, correct?
Yeah, well, I think after you did our little orientation with all the Canadian reps, Jack, I think that we might want to drill down a little bit more into some of the technical operational features of the units, you know, condensate collection and drainage, et cetera, right?
Yeah, so that's what my plan is to, you know, talk about the product, the Pro primarily. Are you using mostly the Pro, Murray?
Yeah, I think the intent is really to go with the Pro right now.
Okay.
It seems to be the most popular package from an appearance standpoint.
So for the folks that hadn't seen it yet, I'm just gonna, I will, after we get finished a little bit later, I'll show the Smart unit as well. But we're gonna concentrate on the Pro. So as you can see here, this is a self-contained unit, Maestro Pro, with no outdoor unit. This is an inverter-driven product. It is very quiet. It is very, you know, it has that Italian design and feel to it. It has a variety of modes that you can put it in, including heating, cooling, silent mode, econo mode. You can also select dehumidification mode. And if you look at the two values that are up here, STC and OITC, that represents the STC is sounds transmission class, and OITC is outdoor-indoor transmission class. Those numbers you see there, the 36 and the 25, are the highest numbers achievable. So no one can have a numbers higher than that. I suppose someday someone might match it, but currently we are the only self-contained unit that can meet those high sound levels. And I think that's a good thing for you to keep in mind when you're talking to folks. In fact, in some cities in the US, you can't even sell a unit in that city if it doesn't meet that city's particular criteria for both of those values. So it comes in quite handy.
Jack, are those AHRI values, or who sets those standards?
Well, they're not AHRI values, but they're tested by Intertech, is the lab that does the testing. But they also do the AHRI testing. So this unit currently does not have an AHRI rating, but it would have if once the virus thing is done. Because when we go to do the testing at AHRI or get the AHRI testing at Intertech, one of our engineers from Italy will be attending to make sure that everything's going as expected. But he is not yet allowed to travel outside Italy. And so as soon as that ban is lifted, then we will have the Pro. Now, because this unit is considered by the Department of Energy as a room air conditioner, it's not required to have an AHRI rating, but we know our customers place a lot of value in that rating. So therefore we are going to have the ratings provided with AHRI ratings. And as soon as we can get that done, I will forward that information on to you. Oh, went too far. All right, sorry about that. So this is, for those of you that I have not met, my name is Jack Bartell, and I am the Director, Manager of Technical Services for North America for Olympia Splendid. On the slide here, you see my email address as well as an 800 number that you can call. You can also call my cell phone directly because that 800 number, in fact, goes directly to my phone anyway. But my cell phone number is area code 405-664-2075. And I am based on the East Coast, although depending on the week, there's no telling where I might be. So, but typically I'm an early riser. I'm up by about 6 a.m. every morning and typically going right to work, which is in my office in my home. So, and one of the things I do quite often is fish. So if you find yourself at all on the East Coast and you want to do a little fishing, you give me a call. We will go out, do a little fishing. We'll talk about business, and then I can charge Diego for the fuel, okay? By the way, in all those pictures, I'm the one with the glasses. So let's talk about the installation of this product. And on average, if you have a standard construction wall, meaning some type of exterior that isn't brick or concrete, but standard stick and plywood and such, it takes about an hour and a half to install the unit. The one you see here is the one we had at AHRI, or at the, I'm sorry, at the AHR conference in Orlando. That's a little demo that we made up. And I actually I was stuck because of the virus in Florida the entire month of April, and I made one a little bigger than this, and it costs about $300 for the materials. And I have an entire material list along with pictures. So if you had an interest in creating a demo, I've got that all covered for you where I can send you those instructions. So this is what ships with the unit. Obviously the unit itself, and then we have the remote control. It requires 2 AAA batteries, which come with the remote. You also have the installation instructions. Now, the installation instructions are currently in English, but we are having them added to both Spanish, and we will have French as well. Those should be available shortly. The D, which is the adhesive isolation tape, that is used on the ring F, okay? And that's used to create the seal between the unit and the ring that's on the inside wall. The outside grill is what you see here, E, and you can see that it has some springs or chains hanging from it, and that's how you put it together with the springs and chains, and I'll show you a better picture of that later. You have the 2 brackets that come with the unit up in the upper right there, L. Now, I know that there have been some folks in the Canadian market as well as the Alaskan market that have asked for the bracket that's used on the Smart is a long piece of steel that can then have holes put in, or that has pre-drilled holes where you can go into a stud. So that's not a problem. If you want those, we are going to have those available for the Smart as well. I'm sorry, for the Pro. And so this M is your template, and that's about a 36-inch by 24-inch sheet of paper that you hang on the wall so that you can do your installation and cut your holes appropriately, okay? And then you have your ductwork, G, and that's what you use to go between the outside wall and the inside wall. I'll show you a better picture of that a little later, okay? Then you have your active carbon filter and your purifying filter. One is green, one is black, and those are optional, but they can be installed on the unit, of course. So this is a suggested tool list I put together for the installation. So, of course, a standard Sawzall would do for standard construction. But if you're going to go through brick, stone, or concrete, I would recommend a 8-inch core bit. The bit can be either a wet or dry, wet being the preferred choice as long as there's water available on the site. A wet bit will last much longer. It takes less time to put to actually drill the hole. And the wet also keeps the dust down, so you don't have this possible health risk with the dust from the concrete or the brick. And of course, you need a proper size drill to use it. I would recommend at the very least a 1/2 horsepower drill, and with a double handle on it, so you can hold it with both hands, because if the drill gets jammed up, you want to be holding on to that thing very tightly so that it doesn't twist and maybe hurt a wrist or an arm. You also need to have a multimeter to measure. From an installation perspective, it's not necessarily required, but if you go to start the unit up and there are any issues, you'd want to have a multimeter for measuring AC and DC volts, AC and DC current, as well as resistance. Temperature probes for measuring both wet and dry bulb, tape or pins to hang the template inside the wall, a razor knife to cut the duct tape to seal the duct seam, both inside and out, and then just standard hand tools that you might need for any type of installation, and then resistors. This is extremely valuable for a contractor that's doing service work on these units, because we have a number of negative coefficient thermistors used to measure temperature in various parts of the unit and the airstream. And if a thermistor fails, you can use a resistor in its place to get the unit operational. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. In fact, this is a look at, on Amazon, this is a package that contains about 600 resistors of various sizes. It costs $5, and that'll be enough resistors to last you a lifetime. So I recommend that to any service technician or service company, that they have those to, again, help get a unit operational. You can also use it to force the unit into various modes of operation, such as defrost, where you fool it into thinking that the temperature is colder or warmer than what it actually is. So these come in quite handy. And then this little bit of information here is just gives you that link, lets you know what the differences are between wet and dry drilling core bits, and it provides the pros and cons. But again, the recommendation from the people I've talked to that have done it, the wet is the preferred version. And here you see what they cost. This is an 8-inch that's available from toolcity.com, and it's $327. But you should be able to make many cuts with it if it's done correctly. And again, this is a wet example. So to begin your installation, essentially you're taking the template and putting it on the wall, and you're marking out your holes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those holes shortly. And then you can mark out your 3/4 inch drain line as well, and your 2 8-inch holes, or 2 6.4 inch holes. Okay, so we prefer that you use the 8-inch holes, because that gives you the best capacity and the highest efficiency. If you use the 6.4 because you don't have the room, then we will have 6.4 size grills that can be used as well. Okay, and so basically you're going to cut the plastic down using a knife, and then the plastic ductwork just folds into a circle, and you cut it a little bit short of your total depth between the inside wall and the outside wall. And on the bottom right-hand picture here, you can see the outside grill, and you can see the inside ring with the chains and the springs that hold them together. So that grill folds in half. So if you're on the second floor, the 22nd floor, and you do all your drilling from the inside, and cutting from the inside, you can fold that grill in half and install it without even having a step outside. And I think that's a nice feature as well. One of the things that's important when you're installing this unit is if you're using the 8-inch holes, you have to cut out the section. It comes shipped for 6.4 inch holes. So as you can see in the upper right here, this highlighted and perforated section has to be removed when you're using 8-inch application. You also have to remove this little extension that's on the condenser fan. That, when you're using 8-inch, that gets removed and discarded. It's no longer used. And you can cut the insulation here with a putty knife or with a knife, and then these are pre-perforated, so you can grab it with a pair of pliers and just bend it, and it'll snap off, and now you have the full-size hole. And you can see in this picture here as well, this is the outside air temperature sensor, because on this side, the air is going into the unit for condenser air or evaporator air in heating mode. And on the right-hand side here, this is where your exhaust is, okay? And then right down here, it's kind of, you can't see the inside of it, but this spot here, you can see where the drain line would go into the unit and it attaches inside the unit. And I'll show you a better picture of that later. Okay, so here's an example of removing that bracket here, that extension, okay? And again, we highly recommend the 8-inch diameter. I ran into a problem with a job here in Miami yesterday where they did not cut those out. They ran 8-inch holes, but they left this bracket on, this extension, and they didn't cut out this piece. And we were getting fault codes. Now, I believe the reason for that was if they had cut the hole 6.4 inches, there wouldn't have been a problem. But when you have the larger diameter duct with the smaller diameter inlet, it impacts the velocity of the air. And I believe that's why we had, because once we eliminated that, the problem went away. So here's a better picture where you can see the condensate drain that you're going to connect to. So typically what we do is when you're installing this unit on the bracket, you're going to hold it out a little bit. You're going to kind of have the bottom out so that you can hook the top, and then it just lays on the wall. And you get your condensate line to come in through the back. And then once you have it on the wall, then you can just pull it a little hard, and then you connect it onto this connector right here. This comes with a plug in it, so you're going to want to remove that plug. This is also the drain plug if you wanted to drain it out the bottom. So typically it's used just for service. If, let's say, your drain gets blocked up, you can put a bucket under there and catch if the water is filled in the drain pan, it can hold as much as 5 quarts of water, okay, or about almost 5 liters. Now notice in the picture here on the upper left, the condensate drain line is pitched to the outside, as is the condenser and the intake air and the exhaust air. They're pitched to the outside. So when you cut your hole, you try to cut your inside hole slightly higher than the outside hole, pitch to the outside. That way, if any water gets into that area, it just rolls back out the grill, no harm, no foul, okay? So this little bracket here, you can see this little access door gets you access to that area. You can see up here, and I'll show you a better picture of it later, right in this area here, there's another door that opens up, and there's an on-off switch in there. And you want to make sure that that on-off switch obviously is on. I've had people call me, and the unit won't start. I plugged it in, nothing. Okay, did you turn the switch on? Because it's hidden if you don't know where it is. Although the installation instruction does point that out. Now this is actually showing the unit with a GFI power plug, which is how it comes from the factory. Okay, and there's a better picture of that on-off switch with the door opened up. Okay, but if you wanted to, you could cut the plug off and wire it directly into your, in other words, the plug is also designed to come out, the cord can come out through the back of the unit into the wall, and then you can put it into, say, a electrical box that you may have had installed, or maybe even run it down to the floor where your outlet is and just connect it onto the outlet. Okay, and it says here that the on-off switch is located on the bottom. It is in fact on the side, so I'll have to make a note to make that change. So one of the things that when you're installing the unit, it's quite easy to clean the filters. The filters clean from the top. So you can see here at the top, there's 3 little clips here. They just have to be pulled. Each of these 3 clips are pulled and that door opens up. And as you can see here, you take out the main filter. It's simply a wash. You wash it and dry it. And then you can see on the far right, the green and black filters. These are optional filters that can be used. They ship with the unit, and it's up to the consumer if they choose to put those on. where you see the data plate, there's a little door here. We actually call it a mask. There's one on the left and there's one on the right. The one on the left opens up and just slides, and that's where you'll find the model number and the serial number, the data plate for the unit. And of course, if you ever have an issue with a piece of equipment, the technical support is through myself. And the very first thing I will ask anytime someone calls me is, what is the model number and what is the serial number? So please keep that in mind, as that was very important to me to get that information right from the start. And I recommend that if someone's on site and they're having any issue whatsoever, take a picture of the data plate and send me that picture, and then the information I need will be on that picture. Okay? If you have to access the unit to get to the components, there are 9 screws that you remove to get that access. So there are 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and 5 in the front. And to get to the 2 in the front, the 2 on either end, you have to open up those masks, okay? Pull them one to the right and one to the left. And then this is actually showing the rotating flap, okay, as being closed. But if you have the unit unplugged, you can gently lift up that flap and the motor will turn with you. Or if it's already installed and it's operational, you can hit the button on the remote to open that flap and then hit the button again to lock it in place at the open position so that you can access those screws. And again, for anyone that may have arrived a little late, if you have any questions whatsoever, ask them at any time, okay? So there you see the cover removed, and you can see there are 2 additional covers, one on the left, one on the right, that cover the electrical components. So those can be removed to gain access to the control boards if you needed to do any troubleshooting. Take note that there are both plastic screws, as for going into the plastic material, and then there are also metal screws. So when you're taking them off, just take note of where they come off of so that you put the correct screw back in there. And one of the most pleasant things about this unit is how quiet it is. I mean, this is a self-contained unit that has a compressor sitting right there, but it sounds exactly like a mini split air handler. You can't even tell the compressor is running on this thing. So it is very, very quiet. And you can see that the level of soundproofing material that's on there that really makes the unit incredibly quiet. So there's the panels removed, and we're showing the components. And you can see in the upper left over here, we have the IPM board. And then just going around clockwise, we have the control board for the outdoor fan, which is a ECM. And then you have the indoor coil. Here we have the outdoor fan. Then we have outdoor fans located here, okay? We have the indoor fan. Then we have the air circulating flap motor. So this is the motor that helps move that flap. You've got your main board, an internal fan, and a water pump. And then you have your EXV, your electronic expansion valve. And then you have your compressor and 4-way valve and other components located here. And under this plastic here, this plastic cover, there is the condensate pump, the flow switches, and the thermo actuator. And I will explain what those things do at another picture. But there are 2 floats in there. But one is low and one is high. When the lower float closes, it energizes a pump that takes the condensate water and pumps it up to the condenser coil, where it re-evaporates and is exhausted out through the airstream, through the exhaust air. And that is only used during cooling. We'll talk more about the sequence of operation shortly, okay? So here you see the indoor and outdoor fan wiring. And again, these are both ECM motors. And of course, we have the inverter driven compressor. So these can all be controlled by the control board anywhere from 35% to 100%. So you can't look at the unit or measure to say, okay, I'm in medium speed or high speed, but you can force it into high speed. by, turning your fan. You can take your fan low, medium, high, but you can also, if you create a differential between your specified temperature, your set point, and the actual room temperature, set it to more than 5 or 6 degrees, within about a minute or so, the unit will be at high speed and high capacity because you're so far from set point. But as it gets closer to set point, it starts to slow down using a PID loop. So a PID loop is proportional integral derivative. And so it looks at how far it is from set point, how much change is occurring to reach set point over a period of time, because it wants to use the least amount of capacity possible to achieve the goal, but to achieve that goal in a way that is efficient and as quick as it can, using the least amount of energy. And here you see the wiring for the expansion valve. And of course, there's a winding check that you can make on the expansion valve. COM to A is 46 ohms. COM B to B is 46 ohms. And the power supply is 12 volts DC. So the thermal actuator, which you see here, is basically a little, it kind of looks like the head of a pin, if you will, of a pen. And when it's activated, it lifts up so that it allows the condensate to drain out through the condensate drain line. It's energized in heating mode. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it also has some heat, and that prevents the condensate from freezing around the thermal actuator so that the water will flow out. Now, of course, in your part of the world, you may occasionally have temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. And at that point, you'd want to make sure your drain line doesn't go directly to the outside where it will freeze, but perhaps somewhere else in the building or into a pump where you will pump it to somewhere in the building. But if you're, again, most times for cooling, you won't ever see much condensate come out of the unit because we utilize most of it for putting on the condenser coil and re-evaporating it out and letting it go out that way. So in the summertime, you'll see very little condensate. In the wintertime, you will see more because of defrost. So again, the condensate pump, it activates in both cooling and dehumidification mode. Of course, it only is utilized when the compressor is operational. If the condensate flow switch remains closed for less than a half a second, the pump doesn't start. So, if it just happens to raise just slightly and then back down, it's not going to start the pump. If it's on for more than half a second, the pump is activated and it will remain on until the contact then opens again. That's the lower float that I was talking about, where the lower float, when it closes, that activates the pump, and that can only occur in cooling and dehumidification mode. If the pump remains on continuously for more than a minute, the thermal actuator is activated and until the pump is turned off. So the thermal actuator, if it's on for more than a minute, then the unit assumes that we have so much condensate that we can't use it all. And so then it will let the rest of that condensate just drain out. And again, if it's on for, if the pump remains on for more than a minute, it's turned off. And for a minimum of 3 minutes, at the end of the 3 minutes, the pump is off. The thermal actuator is also deactivated, or it will remain active until the pump stops. And again, the pump is always off in heating and fan only mode. So again, 2 conditions for use of the thermal actuator are utilized. It's always active in heating mode, and when the condensate management system is not sufficient, meaning we can't put enough of it on the condenser coil. So those are the 2 times when that thermal actuator is in use. Okay. Questions up till this point?
Jack, in the heating mode, when it goes into defrost, how much condensate, how much water is actually produced, do you think?
Well, that's very application specific because it depends on what the humidity level is of the air. Of course, as air gets colder, it holds less moisture. But if you have significant amount of runtime, say at 40 degrees or below, between 30 and 40 degrees, you'll have more condensate than if you have significant runtime, say at 20 or 10 degrees, okay? And we basically say that the unit can provide good return for the watts that you're using down to 5 degrees, and below 5 degrees, the unit won't shut off, but we don't recommend using it at less than 5 degrees because the amount of heat that you're going to get is not worth the effort and the watts that you'll be using, okay? So I can't tell you exactly how much, but I do have applications in some parts of the country where they don't run a drain line at all. In other words, their humidity levels are low enough in the summertime that they'll never open up that actuator. So they leave both drains plugged. And then if they do get a little bit of unusual humidity, the upper float, the one that's the higher float, it has a normally closed switch that opens when it reaches its trip point, and then it shuts the unit off and displays a code saying your condensate system is blocked or full. And so then you can just drain it, as I showed you in that picture earlier. So some people will do it without a drain. And is that appropriate for your market? I can't tell you that because I don't know how much humidity you have. I typically recommend that you always run a drain line, but not everyone does. In fact, a lot of the applications in Europe don't use it. And so there is no drain line. It might take a week or more or a couple of weeks before it will fill and shut off. And then it just gets drained and it'll start again, and then you're back in business. So this is the remote control that shifts with the unit. And as you can see on the bottom right hand, there is a button to change from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So again, that would depend on what you want or what the consumer wants. And in your market, I'm sure it's going to be Celsius for the most part. But you just press the button and that will switch from Celsius to Fahrenheit, okay? You can activate and deactivate the display on the unit with the LED button. You can turn a timer on and off and then set a timer. So let's say you want it to run for 3 hours and then to shut off. You can do that as well, okay? You have an oscillation flap, and that directs the air up or down, depending on whether you have it installed as a high or a low unit, and we'll talk about that shortly as well. And then we have silent mode, which basically allows the unit to continue to operate, but it does so at reduced speed and reduced fan speed so that it is much quieter for night mode. And even though at high speed, if you happen to be near enough to the unit, you can hear the air is the only thing you can hear, but again, that can be reduced for night mode. And then you have your on-off button, choice of mode. So the mode switch lets you choose between cooling, heating, dehumidification. And then you can increase or decrease the temperature with the plus and minuses, okay? So the temperature that you see on the remote and the temperature that you see on the unit is your set point. The unit does not display the actual temperature in the room. It will only display the set point. So if you see 72 degrees on the remote, that should also mean 72 degrees on the unit itself, and that's what you're controlling to. And then all of the icons that can be displayed on the remote control are listed here. So again, the sun, if you will, is used for heating, and that's D1, and the snowflake is used for cooling, and the little water droplet there is used for your dehumidification mode. What we typically refer to as a Wi-Fi signal here, when you see that on the remote, that simply means it's transmitting a command from the remote to the main unit. And then the rest of these icons are kind of self-explanatory as to whether you're using which of the two timers, whether the timers are on or off. Shows you your battery level for your remote control, desired temperature or your programming for your clock, okay? And then, of course, you have your fan speeds where you can go low, medium, high, okay? And the little A in the bottom here, which is D15, shows you are in automatic ventilation mode or automatic fan speed, if you will. Okay. Another note I have to make for myself is to change where we in the US and Canada think of ventilation as air coming from the outside. There is no outside air that comes in from this unit. The outside air or the condenser air and the space air are two completely separate areas, and they don't mix with one another. No outside air comes in. So I've actually had most things, I've changed this from automatic ventilation speed to fan speed, because that's in fact what it is. It's not ventilation, it's the fan. Okay. So again, you have an onboard touch screen as well, and you can turn the unit on, turn it off. You can increase or decrease the temperature right from the unit itself. And then you can look at the color of the LED to see which mode of operation it happens to be in. And I'll explain a little bit more about that going forward. So obviously the plus and minus are fairly self-explanatory, increase or decrease temperature. The upper left here is your basically on-off switch. Your mode button allows you to select your mode of operation and set your parameters. And then, of course, this is an IR, meaning an infrared receiver. So your remote control has to be in line of sight of the unit. So you point it at the unit, basically at the display there. And if you have multiple units in a house that are in different rooms, one remote won't impact the other one because the wall prevents that IR signal from going through. So you'll only activate one unit. Now, if you have multiple units in one room, then you can use the same remote for all the units. By just pointing it at the particular one or in the general area, you could conceivably turn on multiple units at once if they're in the same room. And here you see the onboard touchscreen display, what you might be displaying, okay? So if you are in standby mode, for instance, nothing will be displayed, and LED 5 and LED 1, both of those will be off, okay? If you're in cooling mode, then LED 5 is on and it's blue in color, and LED 1 is off. If you're in heating mode, then LED 5 is red. If you're in dehumidification mode, then your LED 5 is on and you show a blue color, okay? If you're in ventilation mode, meaning fan only, then neither of the LEDs will be lit. If you're in automatic mode, meaning it will switch from heating or cooling depending on what the requirement is at the time, it will display an A. Maximum ventilation speed is high, and then you have medium, and then you have low. You have automatic ventilation speed or automatic fan speed, okay? There's also a dirty filter switch, and it's basically a timer. I believe the time is 250 hours of fan time. So if the fan is running for more than 250 hours, then the F will be displayed. It will allow the unit to operate still, but it's telling you the time to clean the filter, and then you can reset that, okay? If it's displaying an E with the LEDs off, that means you're in energy boost mode or basically economy mode. System enable, contact opening is P. Keypad lock is basically a BL. And then when you install the unit the unit comes from the factory set up for low application, meaning it can be as low as 4 inches from the floor. But if you put it high on the wall, then you have to use a series of clicks on the remote to put it into what's called upper mode or ceiling installation mode. And what that does is it directs the air and the rotating flap. Instead of directing the air up, it directs the air down. So again, if you wanted to reset the filter switch, you can do that on the display, onboard display, and you do that by holding down the mode button and the on-off button. Hold them down simultaneously for 5 seconds to reset it. And then if you want to lock the key, basically lock the keypad, then you hold down the plus and minus simultaneously for 5 seconds, and then you will enable or disable the keypad. Questions up to this point?
Hey, Jack, I got a question for you. I had a customer ask the other day, the fail mode. Does it fail to cooling or does it fail to heating on this?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question a little louder, please?
Sorry, yeah. I was just wondering what the fail-safe mode is on this unit. Does it fail to heat or does it fail to cooling?
Are you talking about the reversing valve?
Yeah, if the reversing valve fails, does it go to heating? Does it automatically go to heating or does it reverse and go to cooling?
If the reversing valve fails, where it won't activate, then that is in cooling mode. Okay, so because the unit is, the factory's contention is that most of the function of the unit is cooling more so than heating. So the reversing valve is energized in heating mode and de-energized in cooling mode. So for whatever reason that the reversing valve did not work, then you would be in cooling mode. Does that answer your question?
That answers my question, yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So cooling mode, basically, when you're in cooling mode, it's obviously, it can modulate between 35 and 100%, but if the temperature is more than 1 degree from set point, above your set point, then the compressor comes on. It will stay on until it gets to 1 degree below your set point, in which case it then shuts off. Okay. So again, you can set it for auto mode or to have it, the fan be at whatever speed you prefer. Auto mode lets the computer decide how much air is required, but if you want it constantly on high, then you can certainly do so. Notice that the outdoor fan is calculated in terms of what speed it will be by the IPM board, and that has a relationship to outdoor air and outdoor coil temperature. So as the coil temperature goes up, the fan will increase when needed. And again, in cooling mode, the reversing valve is not powered. It is not energized. So in heating mode, it's basically the same thing, where if it's 1 degree below your set point, it's going to turn the compressor on. If it's 1 degree above your set point, it will turn the compressor off. The outdoor fan speed is calculated by the IPM board. And of course, for the indoor fan, minimum condenser temperature control, it will be at, depending on what your temperature is on the indoor coil, between 97 and 100 degrees will basically be minimum speed, and then fan speed is settled on basically using the remote control, or set it on the remote control. So you can change it from low, medium, or high, or leave it in auto. Now, defrost mode is activated based on a number of criteria. So if the outdoor temperature is above 41 degrees, while the outdoor coil temperature is below 27 degrees Fahrenheit or 3 degrees Celsius, we can start defrost mode. If the outdoor temperature is 40,
I think we lost you, Jack.
It looks like he's offline.
Okay.
Hey Murray, can you mount these over a baseboard heater?
Well, Well, it's a plastic cabinet. I'm not sure. You need 4 inches of clearance minimum from the whatever's below the unit, so you can get the condensate out if you need to.
Right.
You have to raise it up higher above the baseboard. I guess I'd be a bit leery of having, a warm baseboard right below the unit.
Okay.
Like in some cases, and I've asked the technical question of these guys is, in some cases with one of the other models out in the market there, competitors' product, you can wire at 115 or 230 volts. Baseboard heater out and use the 230 volts going to the baseboard to power the unit. Are you back, Jack?
No, he's still offline.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the biggest thing that, Nick and I met with a few of the contractors 3 weeks ago, and one of the big issues is this condensate management deal. So in condos and multifamily stuff, dealing with the condensates, probably the biggest issue. As he mentioned, in cooling mode, it doesn't really come up like it. Most of the contractors have said that they've never had to, drain the condensate from the unit if you're using it in the cooling mode. But obviously in heating, the way the unit operates is it wants to open that thermal actuator and drain it out. So you could, if you can't externally drain the condensate, or go into a central condensate collection system, that's okay in new construction. You could accommodate that if every unit was going to have that. But in retrofits, how do you deal with the condensate? You'd have to put a container or something underneath there for the heating mode. When it goes into defrost, you've got something to collect the drainage off the coil once it defrosts. I think Ryan had a question about something too, didn't he?
I think Ryan was asking about contractors buying directly, right?
You hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jack.
Were you able to hear? I could not hear you, and I wasn't sure if you could hear me, so I switched over to the telephone.
That's probably better. Yeah, you dropped out all of a sudden. We could all hear each other, but we couldn't hear you.
So this should be better. So, was there a question? If so, repeat it.
We do have another question that we can deal with after. So I think you can just continue to pick up from where you left off here.
All right. So I'm not sure where I cut out, but again, the maximum amount of runtime for defrost is 10 minutes. And if after 1 minute of runtime, the temperature is higher than 54 degrees or 12 degrees Celsius, then the defrost will end as well.
Okay.
Now, silent mode, again, operated from the remote control, basically brings the indoor fan at minimum speed and the compressor at silent frequency, which is not minimum, but it's close to minimum. The external fan is at 30% of maximum speed. So again, it's designed so that you're still going to have heating and cooling, but it will be lower than the noise level will be lower because the fans and the compressors are not running at high speed. Econo mode, when activated, reduces basically your power to 50%.
Hey, Jack?
Yes.
You have a slide for that? We're still on the defrost mode slide.
Good Lord. Let's see. Yeah, I've got the slide up here and it's showing on my end. Let me see. Waiting for next screen. Did the slide come back up showing silent mode?
No, we're seeing defrost mode right now. That's what I'm seeing anyway.
I'm not sure what's going on here. I think our internet connection is. I had a good I did 2 webinars already today, and both of them went smooth. So I'm not sure why I'm having problems right now. I'm going to go to a next slide here.
Jack, you're on your profile says you're offline. So
I'll tell you what, I'm going to try to correct that real quick here. Are you seeing him now?
Nope.
I don't know what's going on here. The problem is if I drop off, then everyone will have to redial back in again. Okay, so I do have. By the way, after this meeting is over, when I have the recording ready, I will also include in the documents that I will send a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So you will have all the slides after the presentation, probably either tonight or tomorrow morning, you'll have the slides, okay? So because we're only a few more minutes in, I'm going to continue on, and then hopefully the internet connection comes back. And are you still just seeing the slide that stopped at before?
Yeah, defrost mode is the last slide we're seeing.
I don't understand. It must be a bad internet connection here at the hotel, although a lot of times in hotels, when around this time, which is 6 o'clock here, is when most people, I guess, are coming back to the hotel and everybody's getting on the internet. So that might be what the problem is here. So I apologize for that. Like I said, I didn't have any problem all day today. So again, I talked about high-low application, and when it comes from the slide I'm looking at now is high wall or low wall, and the unit can be installed 4 inches from the ceiling or 4 inches from the floor. And when you install it up at the ceiling, okay, you're going to configure the unit for, you plug the unit in, and you're going to press the mode key for more than 10 seconds on the control panel until you hear a little signal, a little acoustic sound, and then the display will show PO, and then you press the mode key again, you release it and then press it again, and it will show either UP for ceiling installation or DO for floor installation. And then you hit the plus or minus key to get to the mode you want. So typically on a new unit, you're going to see it'll be on DO for down, and then you click it, the plus or minus key, and then you'll get UP for up, and then it will direct the air down instead of directing the air up. Now, there's also the ability on this unit to have a room contact, and now that can be used as a you could buy a standard occupied switch that when someone walks into the room, as long as there's someone in the room, it will allow the unit to operate, and when you leave the room and there's no more movement, it will turn the unit off. So you're not able to see this right now, but when you take the unit cover off and you take the electrical box cover off, on the right-hand side board, there's a jumper in there that's a red jumper. And you take that jumper and you put your switch, however whether you want it as an on-off or whatever, an occupied switch, it could be whatever you want to use it for. When that terminal is closed, the unit will operate. When that terminal is open, the unit will not operate. And again, you can use that switch as long as you don't have a cable that exceeds 10 meters or about 30 feet.
When you wire that, let's say you put an occupancy sensor in the room, Jack, and you wire it in, and you walk in, the occupancy sensor closes. That allows you then to power the unit on with the remote control?
Yeah, it allows you to power it on with the remote or the keypad on the unit itself, either one.
Okay. So if the unit's on and you leave the room, then the unit will shut off. Is that the case?
Correct.
Okay.
If you're going to use that switch, it comes jumpered at the factory, but if you decide to use it, and it's a requirement in some areas, that the space be occupied for the unit to be allowed to run, and that's strictly for energy conservation.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, if you travel in Europe, you learn very quickly that they control their electricity a lot stricter than we do here in the States and in Canada. Every hotel room that I've ever stayed in Europe and in Asia, you have to put your key into a slot. And then when you leave the room, you have to take your key with you. And then it turns the lights out and it turns the AC off. You can also put the unit in an auto test mode from the touch display. So when you're in standby mode, you keep the plus key and the mode buttons pressed for at least 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, you'll hear a little buzzer. The LEDs will light up one at a time from LED 1 to LED 5, from blue to red. The display will show an 88, and then the auto test mode is activated. The flap opens, the internal and external fans are activated at maximum speed. The four-way valve, the condenser drain pump, and the electronic TXV are all activated. The compressor starts. It rises to 25 hertz and then stops. The flap closes, the unit stop, and the flap closes and stops. Then the internal and external fan, the indoor and outdoor fans, will be stopped as well. You can interrupt the test mode at any time by pressing the on-off button. During the function, the unit does not respond to commands given by the remote control. So when you're in a auto test mode, it's basically going to activate everything so you can see everything is operational, and then it will shut the unit off. But you can't use the remote when you're in auto test mode. Now again, the LED 1 and LED 5, along with the numeric display, okay, when an alarm occurs, the compressor stops, and then it will display an alarm code. The alarm can automatically be reset after 3 minutes if the conditions are normal. So let's assume we have a condition where our condenser air is above an acceptable level, temperature-wise, too high. It will shut off the unit. 3 minutes later, as long as the temperature has come down to an acceptable level, the unit will restart, okay? On the board, there are also 2 LEDs that show the same alarm as the display, and that lets you know that both of those devices are communicating with each other. So the list of alarms is here, and it shows, for instance, alarm number 1 will display a digit 1, and then both LEDs 1 and 5 will be off. And then it's 1 through about 21. So you have 21 different alarms that can be displayed. So typically, if there's a problem, for instance, let's say it's a outdoor coil temperature too high, okay? That's alarm 10, and then both LEDs are off. A 16, for instance, is evaporator coil temperature too high. or I'm sorry, 16 is too low and 17 is too high. Okay. And then you have outdoor unit alarms that will operate based on the LED 1 and LED 5, depending on their color. Okay. So if you have, for instance, an outdoor air temperature sensor failure, you'll have one yellow blink and the display will show the numeric 1. If you're in defrost mode, for instance, which is not an alarm, it lets you know what mode it's in, the red LED will be on once, so it'll blink on, and the yellow LED will blink once, but there'll be no display. That tells you you're in defrost mode. And then, of course, you have safeties such as condenser temperature too high, condenser temperature too low, evaporator high, evaporator low, discharge compressor temperature high, compressor phase over current. These are alarms that would occur based on the number of yellow blinks on the board. And then we have, and again, I apologize that you can't see this, but this will be a separate document that I will send. So basically, I'm going to send Murray a link to download a file, and that will be a zip file, and it will contain installation instructions, tech guides, wiring diagrams, parts list, exploded views for the parts. It will have the specification sheets. It will have this PowerPoint presentation, which includes the troubleshooting section, but it'll be a separate PDF, just the troubleshooting, if that's something that you wanted to forward to your technicians or your contractors. Okay. So the last section here that I would have gone over is the troubleshooting, which again, depending on what code you have, there is a sequence of operation that it suggests that you take. So for instance, if we had let's call it a flash code 16, okay? Internal exchanger or indoor coil temperature too low. If the sensor detects for more than 5 minutes a temperature lower than 28 degrees, that's considered an issue. And then the action there is to check to see if there is a abnormal temperature drop of the indoor coil. And if the temperature is within limits, check the temperature sensor. These are negative coefficient 10K thermistors for everything except the compressor. That has a slightly different compressor to resistance chart. So negative coefficient resistors, or thermistors, I should say, as the temperature goes up, the resistance goes down. So the higher the temperature, the lower the resistance level. And I have the charts listed here. So the temperature sensors from -4 degrees Celsius up to 150 degrees, I'm sorry, -4 Fahrenheit, -20 Celsius, and up to 138 degrees Fahrenheit to 59 Celsius, you have the resistance values that you can refer to check those temperature sensors. And the discharge compressor discharge temperature sensor goes from -4 degrees up to 266 degrees. So it has a much larger range than do the other sensors used for temperature, the other temperature sensors. Okay. Now that is pretty much everything that I have on the technical side. On the Pro, so I will open it up for questions to see if anybody has a question on anything. And I apologize for the interruption of the video or the video feed. Again, that's got to be the hotel. So any questions at this point?
I think I'm pretty good. Mike, Peter? We're good?
All right, so the other, I have a picture standing up here right now of the retrofit kit. Let's say you have an existing PTAC in a room, but they don't want to put a PTAC back in there. We have a retrofit kit that you can use that basically you slide the PTAC out of its sleeve and you leave the sleeve in place. And then you take this 6-sided cube that's made of 1.5-inch ductboard on all 6 sides, and it slides directly into the casing, the sleeve, and then you just mount your you mount the template on the wall over top of where that box is, and you cut your holes out, the 2 8-inch holes and the 3/4-inch one for your drain out of the box. And now you have 3 inches of insulation on the top and the bottom, and left to right, front and back. You have 3 inches of insulation that provide excellent sound attenuation as well as temperature protection and insulation. So it's very easy to do, and it doesn't require that you have to redo the wall. You just leave the outside exterior one in place. So I will be, the pictures of that will be in the PowerPoint presentation that I will send, so that you can see those as well. Questions?
There's a couple other questions on the chat.
Yes.
Warranties or unit replacement warranty or just a parts replacement?
So the warranty on the unit is 7 years on the compressor, 2 years on all parts, and if a compressor fails in the first year, we just replace the unit. Okay.
So you got a DOA warranty allowance somehow? Okay.
So yeah, again, the factory doesn't cover any labor for any part failures, but it will provide a replacement part, and the failure rate on these units is extraordinarily low. So if you, I'm sure you deal with a lot of different types of equipment. I know that Refrigerated Supply, I believe, used to be a York rep, because I've been up there to visit with them up there when I worked for York. And when I worked for a manufacturer, if we had a warranty to sales ratio of 2% or less, we thought we were geniuses. The failure rate on this product, and keep in mind there are over 500,000 of them installed throughout the world already. For the last almost 20 years, the Smart unit has been out there. And the failure rate on the Smart unit is 0.02%. So that's an amazingly low number. So you don't have a whole lot of failures, particularly if the installation is done, as per the instructions. But we do keep a stock of parts for both the Smart and the Pro in our warehouse in New Jersey. And I'm sure if you have enough of these units going out and you want to be comfortable with having local, we can arrange for local stocking as well. And that's something that you would arrange through Diego. But if you have a unit that fails or you need a part, I'm the person that you want to give a call to. Again, and in the materials that I'm going to send you, you will have the outdoor, you'll have all the instructions, but you'll also have a parts list with an exploded view of the unit and the part number, and then you would call me or text or email me the model and serial number, which part you want, and then I would submit that to our warehouse to be shipped to you. I'll need the shipping address where you want it sent, of course. And then I would ask that the parts, depending on the part, I would ask that it be returned to me, because in some cases, I may want to return that to the vendor for tear down analysis. So for instance, I was on the phone earlier with some folks up in Alaska, and they have a unit that has a vibration that lasts for about 6 seconds or so after the unit starts. And I believe the problem is in the indoor fan housing assembly. So I'm going to send them the housing assembly, then they're going to send me the replacement. And again, that unit, in fact, is almost a year old, but like I say, they'll send that back to me. I'll look at it, and then I will probably send it to the vendor. Questions?
Ryan had a question. What is the unit using to switch to a DC inverter voltage?
Well, there is an inverter board on the unit, and the inverter voltage ranges from about 210 volts DC to about 380 volts DC. And in the installation instruction, in the troubleshooting guide, one of the faults is improper inverter voltage. And so the action there is to measure the voltage, which is DC plus and DC minus, on the IPM board, and that lets you know if you're outputting the correct values. And typically under operating conditions, when the unit is running, it will be between 210 volts DC and 380 volts DC. Other questions?
Ryan had asked about, is everything replaceable from the front side when the panel's removed without taking the unit off the wall?
No, not everything. In other words, the condenser fan motor, you'd probably want it off the wall if you were replacing, say the reversing valve or something like that. But the unit it sits on the wall. You can replace virtually every electrical component and harness from the front. In other words, you take that front cover off, and then you take the panels off, and all electrical components can be, except for the condenser fan motor, that you have to take it off the wall, and then you take the back off, and then you have access to the other components. So a lot of what they do in Europe is when there's a problem with a unit, they will take the unit off the wall, and they'll keep a spare replacement unit around. They'll take it off the wall from the consumer, put a replacement in its place, take it back to their shop, and they do the repairs at their shop. In the United States, and I think probably in Canada, a contractor may be less prone to do that. But again, the choice would be theirs. But most things, again, most components can be replaced from the front, with the exception of a couple things which have to be done for the back. And it's 86 pounds, so to do it by yourself can be a little cumbersome. You might want to have a second pair of hands there when you're taking it off the wall, because you just have to pull the bottom away from the wall slightly, and then you lift up off of the bracket, and your unit is now off of the wall, and it can be set on the floor. A lot of times we'll also tell the contractor that when you're cleaning the unit, let's say you're in an area that you have a lot of dogwood, and so once a year you have to clean that condenser coil. It's always best to take that off the wall, just put it on a little dolly, roll it outside, and clean it outside where you won't mess up the house, and then you just put it back on the wall.
Yeah, I think now that I've got my Pro unit set up on my display, next time I'm in Vancouver in a few weeks, then it'll be a good chance to follow up with everybody that attended today. They can have a look at the unit in real life and get an appreciation for how simple that just taking the unit off and cleaning it, doing any work on it is.
So one of the things I would ask from everyone attending, and I think you have your branch managers are from various parts of Western Canada there. We need service centers. I want to establish a network of service centers, and a service center is nothing more than a contractor that has a good work ethic and understands refrigeration, and understands the tools required. And so if that person attends our training, and then we can make them an authorized factory service center. So let's say you have a problem with a unit, a consumer can take it off the wall themselves if they wanted to do so, bring it to a service center to have it repaired. Or they can call that contractor and say, please come to my home and repair my unit, just like they would any air conditioner. And of course, the labor is between the contractor and the consumer. But if the part is under warranty, then the service center could provide the replacement part to the consumer and then ship it to us, and then we provide them a replacement for the part that they used. Okay, so I would ask for you folks to give some thought to which of your contractors do you feel would be good possibilities to be a service center. And in almost every case, I would want to visit with that contractor after they attend our training to physically look at their location, make sure that they have all the things that are supposed to be there, and that's when they would become an authorized service center. So we might make arrangements at some point with Murray and with the rest of you folks where let's say you have a contractor in this city, contractor in that city that you want to have considered as an authorized service center, we'll arrange a trip for me to get up there and visit with the contractor and then look at that possibility of having them as a authorized service center. So if anybody has suggestions for a contractor in your area that you would, and it could be more than one, let's say if you have a large territory, it could be on one side of your territory and then another one on another side. I don't have a limit that I was going to have on the numbers. And again, because these units don't fail that often, the service centers probably won't have a whole lot of problems to deal with. So, but of course, we will work very closely with them to satisfy whatever that need is.
So for the distribution of this, how many people are going to be selling it?
Well,
Currently, Peter, RSL is the only wholesale distributor selling the product in BC.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
and so since they're going to have to come to you to get that unit in your market, and so again, if you have contractors that are going to be doing the installs, any contractor can do the install. In fact, anyone who's not even an HVAC person can do the install, because what are you doing? You're cutting holes and plugging it in the wall. But when it comes to a service center, we would want that to be someone that is, someone that has the skill set to do it correctly and provide the kind of customer service that, a consumer should expect, So I don't know how it is up in your part of the world, but we have a lot of contractors here in the U.S. that are, let's just call them less than stellar, okay? And they would not be candidates for me as a service center.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that, Jack. We have a couple of options here in terms of people that could take on a service center role. And, my take
on RSL might want to be a service center themselves. In other words, if you have service managers at a specific location that can, again, for the most part, all they're going to be doing is opening. Let's say a compressor fails in the first year. We automatically will give them a new unit, and I would have that unit go to a service center. And if there's a service manager at your RSL location, all they have to do is open the unit up, check to see what the compressor failure is. Is it a short? Is it open? Are the windings shunted? Why does that compressor fail? And at that point, we might say, okay, now that we know what the problem is, let's just go ahead and scrap the unit. We might also say, okay, that unit is salvageable. Let's put a new compressor in there, and then let's use it for a demo, or use it as, donate it to a school or something. So if RSL has an interest in having their service managers, perform that task, we can certainly chat about it as well.
If you've ever worked on an Italian car, there's no way in hell.
That's right.
I don't work on cars, so I can't tell you whether that's true. But I can tell you that, again, from an accessibility perspective, these units are compact, right? So, there's 5 pounds of poop in a bag that holds 3 pounds. So everything is in there tight, but everything is accessible.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's
all
it.
right.
I think that's it for questions. I don't see anything else here. Mike, Peter, anything else from your end? Okay, well, I appreciate your time.
Good stuff.
I'll look forward to getting the recorded version of this presentation, which we can distribute to the participants at Refrigerative Supply.
And I'll tell you what I might do, because we lost, I don't know, maybe half of the audio or the video section. I've recorded this multiple times. Maybe I'll send you one that is one of the other ones where you won't have the problem with the, not having the last portion of it. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'm sure that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I gave everyone my email address. It's just jack.bartell, BARTELL, at olympiasplendidusa.com. And my cell phone number is area code 405-664-2075. And you're welcome to call me at any time.
Okay, I'll make sure everybody has that contact information as well.
And like I say, anything having to do with parts, service, application. Let's say you have a specific application that is maybe a little bit outside the box. Let me know about it. Maybe we can make it work. Okay, so again, the maximum distance that you can have between the outside wall and the inside wall is 39 inches. So, and it has to be basically a straight duct going from inside to outside. There's no elbows allowed, nothing like that. But we're working on some alternatives there. But, and you know, if you have something that's outside the box, let me know. Let's try to come up with a solution.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time. It is 7 minutes to happy hour here at the hotel, so we're going to have to cut it off.
Sounds good. Okay.
Well, thank you everyone, and appreciate your time. Thank you and I'll look forward to chatting with you again, and maybe coming up to your territory and chatting with some of your customers as well.
Sounds good, Jack. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Bye now. Take care.
Thanks, Jack.